Hello again. Children as young as 11 are being beheaded by militants in Mozambique's conflict-torn Cabo Delgado. That's according to aid agency Save the Children. Thousands of people have died in the conflict, with over 500,000 people forced to flee their homes. Well, joining us is Chance Briggs from Save the Children. Let's hear from him what they're hearing. Chance, good morning. And this is really such a horrific and sickening story, the details that we're reading. What are the stories you're hearing at Save the Children?
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, as your audience probably knows, the conflict in Cabo Delgado province in Mozambique's extreme north has been brewing for 3.5 years, and it's been getting increasingly violent. The insurgents have a habit to go into villages and burn the roofs, burn people's houses, and chase people away, and in some cases kill them. We have now been getting reports of children as young as 11 years old, as you said in the intro, being killed by these insurgents. We cannot say why. We don't have any numbers to say how often this occurs, but we have eyewitness testimonies from families who have lost their loved ones. And it does sicken us to our core. It brings tears to the eyes of our staff, as it would, I think, to your audience. And Save the Children is saying that what's happening here is a tragedy, and it's unconscionable, and it has to stop. Well,
is anything being done to protect these families and these children, Chance? Is anyone actually paying any attention and doing something to get them out of harm's way?
Well, absolutely. Like in any country, when there's an insurgency, there's a counterinsurgency, and I believe the government is doing its best to fight the insurgency. But we do have a territory now with about 9 districts where there is tremendous danger and tremendous risk for these families. Most of the families now, we would say, have fled the area, and in fact we have 670,000 people who are displaced from this part of Cabo Delgado into other parts of the province and even in other provinces. That represents about 1/3 of the population of the entire province. So we would like to believe that many of the people who are at risk of this violence, including children, have managed to escape, especially over the past year. And Save the Children, the government, the UN agencies, and other humanitarian actors are, of course, doing our utmost to address the basic human needs of these people who have lost everything and in many cases fled their villages with nothing but their clothes on their backs.
And Chance, in terms of actually dealing with the issue, with the insurgents and their actual reason for this conflict, I mean, do you know, sort of in the political backgrounds or whatever it is, what's being done on that front?
You know, we're a humanitarian organization, and so we focus on helping those who are in need and those who have suffered from this conflict. We assume and believe that there are many actions in the background to try to find a resolution to the conflict. And of course, peace is what will put children out of conflict's way and out of harm's way. And so it's peace that we certainly hope for. But as humanitarians, our focus is on those who have been displaced, and we're doing everything that we can for them.
But in your role there, though, are you seeing or are you hearing anything as to any kind of will to sort this out?
You know, again, it's a political issue, and it's not for us to speak on that. We know that the Mozambican government has in the past negotiated with its adversaries and has successfully concluded many peace deals. But we don't know exactly what might be happening along those lines. What we know is that thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of people have fled this conflict zone, and we don't have enough financial resources as a humanitarian community to address their basic needs. These are people who need food. The United Nations actually estimates that 1.3 million Mozambicans need food assistance this year because of the conflict. Many of these displaced families have come into host families, cousins, distant relatives, and just showed up and said, we need safety. And so those families are really struggling to get by. And with the COVID pandemic, Mozambique's economic situation has gotten far worse. In fact, 63.7% of the population here are now living below the poverty line, and it's probably much, much higher in Cabo Delgado province. So the humanitarian community has put out an appeal for more resources so that we can help children have clean drinking water and access to clean sanitation, that they can go to school, because there's a need to build new school classrooms to accommodate all of the children who are now accommodated in the southern part of the province. there's tremendous needs.
Yeah, I would imagine that this is bordering on a humanitarian crisis, if it isn't one already, Chance. I mean, like you say, what was the number? Nearly 670,000 people now displaced. That number, of course, will grow as well. Apart from just what is physically needed to actually, get them from day to day, who's helping them with dealing with the trauma of all of this? Or is that just something that's just a little further down the line at this point? It's just to keep them alive. That's the priority.
In fact, Save the Children and our partners, including local government agencies, are working with children and trying to help them through the psychosocial trauma that they have experienced. It's a terrible, terrible thing. Some of these children have just witnessed the type of atrocities that none of us should ever see. And so there are mechanisms in place to refer these children to the types of services that they need that will help them get through this. Children can be very, very resilient. And one key thing that's needed is to get children back into schools, to give them the structure and the safety of going to school and learning again. And that's a huge challenge now because there just aren't enough classrooms and there aren't enough teachers.
And with COVID at the moment, Chance, I mean, what is the situation in those displacement camps? And I would imagine that you're running out of space there as well.
The camps themselves are rather full. That's true. And in terms of COVID, the risk of COVID is the same in Cabo Delgado as it is throughout the country. We've been blessed. I think that our rates of COVID prevalency are not as high in Mozambique as in some other countries. And the government and civil society are working very hard to make sure that people understand infection prevention and control. We're not aware that there have been any significant rates of COVID in the displacement camps that would be any different from the general population.
And in terms of protecting these people who are targets in those displacement camps, and yourselves as well, your organizations and your workers, just who's keeping you safe from the insurgents as well?
So the insurgency is limited largely to these 9 districts. And so the reason people have fled those districts is to find safety elsewhere. Most of Mozambique is a very, very safe country. And many of your viewers have probably visited Mozambique. It's a beautiful country. And so our staff and the displaced people in the southern districts and in other provinces are considered very, very safe. And that's why they've sought that safety. But, of course, many of them would hope to be able to go home. They've lost their livelihoods. Most of these people are fisher people, and they have farms and fields, and they've abandoned all that. And that's really why we need peace.
All right, Charles, very quickly for us, how can we help you help them?
Well, financial resources is the biggest thing needed. The government, the UN, and international NGOs like Save the Children are all desperately in need of financial resources to provide the basic services that these people need while they're temporarily displaced, or to help those who voluntarily choose to resettle in new parts of the country. That's the biggest thing we need, is more money.